Good morning and welcome to the NexusForum Final Event. My name is Tajana Medakovic. Today, I will be guiding you through this session. As we can see on the agenda, it is a packed session full with interesting speakers, insights. Next slide, please. Thank you. With insights and lessons learned. So in the next 2 hours, please stay with us. And I have the great pleasure of announcing our first speaker, who is Maria Angeliki Evliati, Nexus Forum project coordinator and the person who has been guiding us and directing us in these past 2.5 years. Maria Angeliki, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Tajana, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the NexusForum final webinar, Shaping Europe's Cloud-Edge-IoT Future, going from insights to action. I'm really delighted you could join us online today from across Europe and beyond. I know we have colleagues from Japan, and I see many other familiar names here in the list. It's people we worked together from other sister projects, people that actively engaged in our working groups and various consultations. And we do know your time is valuable. So my colleagues and I have planned a compact, focused, but yet quite an insightful session for you. We can switch to the next slide. So NexusForum started in 2024. At that time, there was strong activity in the Cloud-Edge-IoT ecosystem. We could witness excellent research. Ambitious industrial initiatives were getting started, IPSIS to name one of them, and growing policy engagement at the EU level. Our role was to connect these activities and all the communities behind them, building also relations with Japan and South Korea as countries sharing the same values and also some of the challenges we are facing in Europe. The objective was to provide the European Commission with a policy and technology roadmap to show how Europe could become digitally sovereign, grounded on stakeholder input from all over Europe and beyond. We have involved hundreds of large and small players, SMEs, startups, researchers, and the public sector. Fast forward to today, 2.5 years later, the world looks quite different. The geopolitical situation has changed. AI is here to stay. Our project is almost complete, and we are here to share our major takeaways and recommendations about what we need to do in Europe in terms of research, in terms of policy, in terms of partnerships, and in terms of investments. The timing of this event could not be better. Just days ago, the European Commission presented the tech sovereignty package, including the Cloud and AI Development Act. And this marks a strategic move towards increased European ownership and leadership over cloud, AI, and data in Europe. And that is to ensure a resilient digital infrastructure that basically underpins critical services of our society, like healthcare, energy systems, and public administration, to name a few. In a moment, I will hand over to our next speaker, and you will hear directly from the European Commission on current policy priorities in the AI, cloud, and edge. You will also hear the lessons learned in digital sovereignty from Japan and South Korea. We will present our key findings and recommendations for policy, research, and innovation. And finally, we will discuss the big question, that is, how do we move from strategy to implementation? I strongly encourage everyone to stay engaged throughout this webinar, to share your reflections wherever possible, We have time for Q&A, and of course, we are always happy to stay in touch and answer questions even after the event as well. So with that, thank you once again for joining us online, and very pleased to welcome you at our NexusForum Final Event.
Maria Angeliki, thank you very much. As you mentioned, our next speaker will be our program officer, Ana Juan Ferrer. Allow me just a moment to share your screen. Vuk, can you please stop sharing? Thank you very much. Okay. Anna, please go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Tasha, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in the final event of NexusForum. I still remember the kickoff with my colleague Maria Chakali for the very first day that you were initiating the project. And before going ahead, congratulations from all you have achieved during this period. Your inputs have been really essential for us. And you will see in a moment in my presentation exactly where. So what I'm going to present you here is the what Maria Angelique was mentioning before. It's the tech sovereignty package that we have presented that we presented just last week. What I'm going to provide you is an overview, especially focusing, of course, on the Cloud and AI Development Act, and in the aspect of the research and innovation that it contains. But let me start from the beginning. What it is, the tech sovereignty package, for the ones of you that you haven't had the chance to read the overall communication. It is a package that we have presented with the overall aim of increasing the sovereignty of the technological sovereignty of Europe in key technologies. The package is structured in two main legal acts: the AI Chips Act 2 and the Cloud and AI Development Act, and it contains also an open source strategy that it is very much important and relevant for the context of NexusForum, as well as a strategic roadmap for the digitalization and AI in the energy sector. If you can move to next slide, please. So what it is more concretely, the aim of the tech sovereignty package, it is to develop technologies that increase Europe's ability to develop, control, and scale critical technologies, infrastructures, and services and data, including the creation of digital ecosystems that are essential for our economic development, our security, and our society, and also to diversify the supply chains and the technological exposure to reduce strategic dependencies and resist cases that we may face of foreign interference. So basically, it focuses on three main aspects. To foster the adoption of digital technologies all across Europe, also to leverage the industrial strength that we have in Europe in order to facilitate that key technologies such as cloud and edge computing, but AI in general, they are widely used across the continent, and also to ensure the security of the supply, that we have a sufficient critical mass and a sufficient maturity of European providers that can respond to the European needs. Moving to next, as part of the package, as I mentioned, a very important aspect for us, of course, it is the Cloud and AI Development Act. The aim of the act, it is to make sure that we have in Europe world-class research, development and innovation in AI enabling technologies. And I will go in more detail on what it means concretely. It also aims at developing the sufficient compute capacity that the European businesses needs, with a view of tripling the data the data centers that are available in Europe by 2035, and also to have aspects of improving the technological sovereignty and the competitiveness in the area of cloud and AI. Going a bit more in detail on what it means for each one of the aspects, for R&D, it establishes what we call the Cloud and AI Leadership Initiatives that are implemented through 8 grand challenges that aim at boosting the research and innovation and to develop and deploy next generation cutting edge technologies in the fields of AI services, cloud computing, and data centers. Also, this ambition of scaling the compute capacity that exists in Europe, it introduced new concepts that data center accelerator zones, more predictability to getting permitting for the construction of new data centers, and also to facilitate and streamline the conditions of deployment of data center capacity across the EU. And in terms of autonomy, and this is the aspect that it is of course gaining more attention of the Act at this stage, it is presenting a framework for cloud and AI sovereignty that the public sector can apply. It also presents a work criteria for public procurement in order to foster the EU value added. It also has new mechanisms, or proposes, better say, new mechanisms for joint procurement of cloud computing across the EU, and also some initiatives that can help the public sector in federating their infrastructure and to enhance the use of open source. So this is in a very quick manner what the Cloud and AI Development Act is about. If you move to next step, to next slide, I'm going to focus more, as I understand it's the right context to do here in NexusForum, on what are our ambitions in terms of RD&I. The Cloud and AI Leadership Initiative, they have 3 main objectives. To support the development and the deployment of cutting-edge cloud and AI technologies, to reinforce the data center and cloud capacity, and also to stimulate the union's demands, deployment and uptake of cloud and AI technologies, both in the public and the private sectors. In order to achieve this general objective, the package the Act defines 8 operational objectives to work on, and here you only see the titles, but you have in the proposal the more details on what we mean with these headings here. But basically, we have aspects of advanced data center technologies that basically they are looking at the improving the energy efficiency and the sustainability of data centers through a number of techniques, and also making use of AI in order to improve the operation of the data centers themselves. Also, it contains aspects on developing cloud and AI stacks, and in this sense, it is foreseen as a hardware and software stack, so including the possibility of having, sorry, I have some colleagues doing noise here. It includes the possibility of having European cloud and AI servers that integrate chips that are coming from the CHIPS Act 2 or other initiatives that exist, but also to expand across the stack, following the idea of the compute continuum that it is quite familiar, I would say, to NexusForum. In this, we have also aspects of frontier physical and industrial AI in order to develop novel capabilities in the field, platforms for AI agents, the adoption of AI systems and models for the public sector, and also actions to facilitate adoption of cloud to the levels of the digital decade in the private sector. If you move to next, just very quickly, in order to materialize the implementation of these operational objectives, we have developed 8 kind of equivalent grand challenges. The idea is that these grand challenges will be implemented by the Commission, but also by the member states, including ethics and the joint undertakings that will emerge out of the next MFF. Funding for these are expected to be partially union programs, but also RDFF and RFF. And also the idea is that there have to be quite tight complementarities and synergies among the work that we aim at doing as part of the Cloud and AI Development Act and the CHIPS Act 2 and the open source and other relevant national regional and national strategies. It also, if you have the possibility of reading the text, it also sets up some new developments, such as the Experience and Accelerator Centers for AI. It aims at complementing the national cloud and AI strategies and to include elements of these grand challenges into it. And for the specific projects that will be dealing with frontier AI, the idea is that it will put in place mechanisms in order to facilitate that these projects could get, when necessary and when certain conditions are fulfilled, access to the capacity that the Commission has under the AI gigafactories. So this is a kind of quick overview that I could prepare for you of the Cloud and AI Development Act. Thank you very much for your attention. And I don't know, Tanya, if you plan to have questions now or...
So absolutely, we do have time for some questions. Please write your questions in the chat. If there are no questions for the time being, you can also write them during the session, and we'll try to respond them either at the end of the next one or at the end of the today's session in total. Okay, so I don't see any for the time being. Anna, thank you very much. I think this was a great insight into the Cloud and AI Development Act, something that all of our participants for sure value very much. Thank you for joining us and being part of the project as well for all this time and for your support.
Thanks a lot to you.
So now we will move on to our next speaker. So as Maria Angeliki has mentioned, we had the pleasure to collaborate with the ecosystem, not only in Europe, but also with Japan and South Korea. So we do have some lessons learned, and they will be presented today to you by Deputy Director of the Center for Business Information and Ethics at Meiji University and our partner, Dr. Andrew Adams. Dr. Andrew, the mic is yours.
Okay, thank you, Tigana. So within the project, we had partners in both Japan and Republic of Korea. That's ourselves at Meiji University at the CBIE and people at Yonsei University in South Korea. During the project, we studied a number of different international potential partners in this area for the EU, both, of course, Japan and the Republic of Korea, but also New Zealand, Canada, and India. And we have policy briefs around the situation in each of those countries, plus final comparative document available at the EU Cloud-Edge-IoT website. So I'll primarily talk about the situation in Republic of Korea and Japan today, although many of the issues are common with these other countries that we studied as well. So as Anna talked about, there is growing concern within the EU about dependence on foreign, particularly US, but any dependence on foreign infrastructure for the public sector in critical national infrastructure and in particular national security infrastructure, but also going across into the commercial sector. There is a growing understanding that the dominance of a single country in providing the critical parts of modern economies and modern governments is dangerous. On the other hand, there is very little in the way of an appetite within Europe to try and replace over-reliance on a small number of US hyperscalers with a European equivalent. And so much of our project has been about what are the other options? How can we promote a different route which enables European and potentially in other countries, other local national providers to compete on a reasonable playing field in the commercial sector, to avoid having this critical infrastructure dependent on a single point of failure as much as anything else. Now, as was mentioned in the introduction to today's event, since the start of the project, the world's geopolitical situation has changed somewhat. And we now have, if I can be blunt, something of a rogue administration in Washington, DC, doing things such as applying sanctions to individuals attached to the International Criminal Court. This raises the stakes in this whole area. Now, in the project, one of the things we've talked about in how we seek to enable the development of suitable economies of scale and to avoid being seen as attempting to create a new European hegemony. We've got the idea of pooled digital sovereignty. So instead of the digital sovereignty, the project is seeking to advise the Commission on how to achieve, being a replacement of dependence on US hyperscalers with new European hyperscalers. The idea is that inspired by one of the EU's core concepts of pooled sovereignty, what does this look like when applied to the digital area? And that's what we've come up with in issues such as ensuring federatability, interoperability, and a free and fair actual market in these areas. Now, these concerns about over-reliance on a small number of international companies based in the US are not solely the province of the EU. Both the Republic of Korea and Japan have public figures in both parliaments and the private sectors who have expressed similar concerns about the reliance of both the public sector and the private sector in these countries on these highly influential US companies. So we've got a number of areas that we've studied to see what the emerging potential for this idea of full digital sovereignty can give us, with particularly Japan and Republic of Korea, but as I say, these other countries studied as well. So the four areas I want to briefly cover are semiconductors, data spaces, smart cities, and AI. So in the semiconductor space, this is the underpinning aspect of this all. At the moment, actually, it's not so much US hyperscalers that are the problem, it's the issue of Taiwan. Taiwan produces still something like 70 or 80% of the world's leading edge chips. Yes, there are chips created in other countries, but most of the leading edge chips are designed and fabricated either in Taiwan or in factories that are owned and operated by Taiwanese companies. In this current geopolitical environment, this is deeply concerning because of the possibility of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Various countries, including particularly both Japan and South Republic of Korea, are also aware of this issue. And as with Europe, with the CHIPS Act and CHIPS Act 2.0, there is significant interest in developing more of a homegrown. In both Republic of Korea and Japan's cases, this is regrowing their semiconductor industry. Both countries historically in the 70s, 80s, even throw into the 90s, had significant semiconductor design and fabrication, but the open market in these areas eventually meant that they'd lost out to Taiwanese competition. So there is an interest in developing this. Now, some of this is based on partnership with the major Taiwanese company, TSMC, but there's also interest in regenerating the capability of the workforce in both countries on the design side. Now, at the moment, those design developments and those education developments are at an early stage in both countries, but this is a key opportunity for a focus on the open hardware approach of the RISC-V chipset and designs to build this pooled digital sovereignty. These are not going to be the absolute cutting edge of special purpose chips. However, the absolute cutting edge of special purpose chips is not where the mass market and not where most of the digital sovereignty concerns are occurring. It's the workhorse chips, the chips that go into everything we buy these days, everything from smart TVs to even dumb dishwashers and dumb washing machines have these chips in them. And they're currently designed and or built in Taiwan. A focus on an open system would allow the quicker and easier redevelopment or development of the knowledge base, the employment base, the worker base, and potentially the fabrication base. And there is common ground there with Japan and Republic of Korea that the EU should seek to work with. We have a great opportunity in that both Republic of Korea and Japan are now partners in the Horizon Europe and most likely the follow-up Framework Horizon program, and that can form a solid basis for developing this approach to both open hardware, but also the education of the next generation of engineers. So moving on now briefly to data spaces. Japan is already a key partner in the data space area, and in fact has recently become a new voting board member of the Gaia-X consortium. Republic of Korea is a less rosy opportunity here. They are seeking to do some sectoral integration of data space-like concepts there, and that might be an opportunity to bring Republic of Korea more involved in this area. But certainly in data spaces, Japan is a key partner to move forward on that. Smart cities is interesting. There was a lot of interest in smart cities 10, 15, 20 years ago. We now seem to be in a state where it's background rather than foreground. The expectation is that cities are becoming smartened. It's potential for co-learning with data spaces, but again, the danger here is that there are a lot of particularly US companies selling proprietary solutions in this area that we need to be careful about allowing a new lock-in in the smart cities area. And finally on AI, from my point of view, LLMs are a large hype bubble waiting to burst, and we should be very wary of investing too much into the LLM AI. However, the machine learning side of AI, the broader use of AI and the capability to support that is really important. And Japan and Republic of Korea seem slightly less prone to the LLM hype, but they are both very interested in the general machine learning approaches. And in particular, again, with both being associated with Horizon Europe and Horizon Framework 10 likely, there is solid opportunity there for collaboration on open machine learning AI technology, stressing the efficiency of application, and that again is a concern in both countries that is shared with the EU. One thing that the Horizon Europe and Horizon Framework 10 should provide is an avoidance of the likely funding drought in research, innovation, and development that will come when this LLM AI bubble bursts. And so the engagement of Republic of Korea, Japan, and the EU in a combined push to develop useful, real AI right from the ground up, from semiconductors to applications in data spaces, to applications in smart cities, to applications across the public and private sectors, is a real opportunity. So that's what I have to say. There are solid opportunities there for collaboration with Japan and Republic of Korea, and I would hope that we can see that coming to fruition over the next few years as we see the policy and research innovation recommendations of the project taken up by the Commission and also by the other countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew. I would say you always deliver a speech that is definitely leaving food for thought. Thank you for this international perspective and showing the importance also across different domains, including the political and economical one, besides the technical one that we always put at the spotlight. I don't see any questions for the time being, so I would suggest that we move on. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we will try to address them towards the end of the session. So our next speaker is actually going to tell you a little bit more about one of the most important outcomes of the NexusForum project, which is the NexusForum roadmap, and share some key insights with you. I would like to introduce Thomas Olson-Timodas from RISE. Thomas, mic is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, maybe a little bit low, so if you could speak up a little bit, but we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I can change
Yes.
the speaker.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. So I will talk a little bit about the roadmap. Maybe you can, next slide, please. So the research and innovation roadmap for the cognitive computing continuum. So this is really addressing these technologies, AI, data, hardware, software, cloud edge, and so on. So it's really a very big kind of ecosystem that we have been tackling here, but it's also something that is necessary to align across these different communities. So this roadmap, what's the motivation for this roadmap? Why do we create a new roadmap, right? That was one question from that we got a lot, that why another roadmap? But we see a lot of trends. For example, the convergence between these computing and ecosystems is converging. For example, industrial automation, cloud, telco, and HPC, and so on. And this is really also driven by this kind of data-driven trend towards data-driven everything. And another thing is that in the recent years, these recent developments in AI, LLMs, agentic AI really changes a lot of the kind of fundamental assumptions that we have. And like Andrew as well mentioned, that there's a lot of pressure strategically with these new kind of advances and the economy shifting. So Europe really needs to think about how to position itself here and stay competitive. And of course, we have this problem of infrastructure that Europe hasn't invested enough in its own, or European companies haven't invested enough in data center infrastructure. And of course, if you want to build more data center infrastructure, energy becomes a key constraint here. So next slide. Okay, so this roadmap has been a very big work, and it's involved many different people from different organizations, also outside the consortium. We have had different consultations, we have had surveys, and we have had working groups as well, where people have worked on the roadmap. So how we have organized it is we start from some strategic destinations that we think are important to Europe from the discussions we have heard. And then we organize according to technology pillars. And in the roadmap document itself, there's more details than detailed recommendations for across these pillars. Next slide, please. So these strategic destinations that will be referenced again in the policy presentation later, it's really that it's important that we have scalable and energy efficient AI and data processing. We should promote open European hardware and computing ecosystems. And Europe needs to be competitive in AI and machine learning. And of course, we also need capabilities and infrastructure that they are secure, they are sovereign, whatever that means, and interoperable. And one thing, of course, is important when we develop all of these technologies, we want it to be used and in the economy, right? And provide values in the economy and to the citizens and to the companies. And another thing is we are talking very much about where Europe is behind and where other countries are ahead. But it's also important to remember that there are technologies in the future that will be very important as well. So we should remember those. And in some of them, Europe is currently quite strong as well. So that's a good thing to build on. So next slide, please. Okay, so when we started with this roadmap, the whole project, this was kind of the big scare, right? That the whole data center infrastructure cloud market is dominated by a few cloud hyperscalers. Now, this is a big motivation. And is this currently kind of what we're scared of right now? So if we go to the next slide. So these companies, even the cloud hyperscalers, are worried by the new emerging, I call them AI hyperscalers, but maybe it's not the way people use these terms. But it's really these AI labs, right? Anthropic, OpenAI, to some extent also Google is staying competitive. And it's really that the enterprise market for AI is dominated by a few companies, and they're even new companies. One of them is even just a few years old. And this really shows a change, right, in what is the new kind of vendor lock-in. And a lot of companies are even abandoning their own internal AI efforts because they think the AI models provided by or this agentic AI provided by the labs are so good that they don't want to develop their own models. So this is currently what is happening, right? But of course, if you look at what developers prefer rather than the enterprises, then we have these open source or open weight models, let's say. And there, of course, China is dominating. The big open weight models are from China. So next slide, please. So given that, we have added much more emphasis. So the roadmap has been developed in 3 versions. And in this last version, there's much more focus on AI and what is needed from the continuum for AI, and also what are some trends in AI that we need to become competitive in. And so it's across these layers, the foundational technologies, the infrastructure, hardware, software stack, and how AI also can be used as tooling for developers and infrastructure management. And also, of course, getting it out into the industry and public sector. Next slide, please. Okay, so summary then of some insights from the roadmap. I will present them now. So the next slide, please. So one thing is that AI changes how we approach things. So one thing, if we want to have a kind of interoperable and open infrastructure spanning different environments, we need also software layer that makes AI portable, right? So we should be able to also have AI models and the software layer that makes it easy to portability between the different environments and different providers as well. And also remember that training and inference require different infrastructure and architectures. I think this is something that is not always appreciated, but this is something very important to remember. And inference is an important thing when you actually get it out in the industry and the adoption, right? So one thing then is, what is currently the trend in AI? So we are talking about European frontier AI capacity, training LLMs, and so on. But if we look at the big AI labs, they have already went into other they're still developing LLMs, of course, that are increasingly better, but they shifted into this agentic AI, which is not just an LLM, right? It's a whole system engineered around the LLM that also combines other types of capabilities, and this is more towards the neurosymbolic systems. And this is something that could also be an opportunity, right? So it's important that Europe builds the capacity to develop frontier AI and LLMs, that we have the infrastructure, we have the skills. So we really need to strengthen the ecosystem of people that can train frontier AI. But if we look at what is needed in the economy, it's also, if we want to compete with the AI labs right now, we need to maybe adopt a more pragmatic stance and allow open weight LLMs to be used as well as the foundation for agentic AI. So Europe can really become, for example, go for becoming good at agentic AI, and until European LLMs, competitive ones, are available, maybe it's possible to use open weight LLMs. Of course, you need to think about which use cases are okay. Sorry, if you go back to it. Yeah. So for agentic AI, there's a lot of things around this harness that you need to invest in and do some research and innovation in, but there's a lot of suggestions in the roadmap. And of course, looking beyond the LLMs, which also Andrew mentioned, which is, for right now, people are talking about world models, physical AI, neurosymbolic AI. So these are some things that are kind of trending right now, but maybe not fully in the mainstream. So it's very good to make sure that we also support such initiatives, and also looking at building some capacity in Europe to follow what are trending AI technologies and adapting to that. So, and the AI factory ecosystem is a very good foundation for this as well to build around. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, and we talked a lot about hardware sovereignty. And it's important to remember that hardware also needs, if you develop a new hardware architecture, you also need to make sure that the software layers are adapted, right? So if you want to establish which we should in Europe establish this kind of RISC-V and open hardware ecosystems. We also need to invest in compilers, runtimes, libraries, for example, common AI libraries. Things are getting better with LLMs. They are much more vendor neutral, but traditional AI frameworks are very tied to the NVIDIA ecosystem, for example. So these are things to also keep in mind. And of course, demand. If you create new hardware, we need to make sure that there's a customer, right, for this hardware. So it's really important to work early on to make sure that we design hardware that is going to be used as well. So really having this kind of hardware, software, and algorithm co-design approach, that hardware is not isolated. It's also tied to software and the use cases. And the next slide, please. Okay, and regarding hardware, I think there has been a lot of talks about we need GPU clusters to stay competitive or to become competitive in AI. And that is true if you want to develop frontier large language or AI models from scratch, right? And it's very important to have these GPU clusters to do that. But we also need to remember that when it comes to inference, these GPU clusters are not really the solution that is needed. It's really a combination of GPUs, CPUs, and so on, and storage. And these really large models, memory becomes a problem, right? How you manage these layers of memory with the processing. And also when it comes to LLM inference, you can split it into two stages. And basically the second stage doesn't really do well on GPUs. So there's really an opportunity to invest in other types of processing architectures here. And there's a lot of use cases where Europe can play to its strengths as well in industrial systems, for example, and the devices. And if you go to the next slide. If you can go back to the previous slide. So there's another thing, which is this kind of interconnects because of this memory bound problem. And that's also somewhere Europe has been traditionally good. And there are other countries as well that are looking into this and good at this. For example, in South Korea and Japan, they're very good with some of these technologies as well, also memory. Next slide, please. And then we have this kind of something that has been built for a very long time in Europe, which is the federations. And we see some uptake of data space technologies and federation technologies, even outside of Europe, which sometimes can be surprised how far these things have traveled. So there are ecosystems forming around these, and it's important to support them. And also, it's important to remember that not everything should be federation as well, because a challenge here is that you really need to have stakeholders that want to create federations together, and not every use case needs federations. So it's important to have a kind of dual approach that where there are ecosystems for federations forming, it's very good to support them. But also remember that there's a lot of things that we need to develop around AI, for example, that may not depend on federations, which may be easier to do also. So it's good to have this kind of dual approach. Next slide, please? And also on that note, that when there have been a lot of infrastructure investments in Europe, for example, the AI factories, and now they're coming the AI gigafactories, Euro HPC, and so on. And there's a lot of also cloud capacity being built in Europe. But it's important to remember why companies chose these cloud hyperscalers. And one reason is because their ecosystems are so integrated. It's easy to deploy things. It's very user friendly and easy to use, right? So it's really important to invest in this kind of software and ecosystem layer to make sure that, for example, the AI factory ecosystem, you want to make sure that the AI trained there is easy to deploy in cloud uh, providers for inference, and it's really important that you have this kind of easy tooling for developers to make it easy to use the infrastructure. This is really something that Europe needs to get better at if we want to compete and become competitive. And of course, the energy grid, it's important that data centers become a more integrated part of the energy grid. And this kind of energy flexibility concept, what does it mean for data centers? It's a very important thing to investigate. Next slide, please. And if we want adoption, we also need to invest more in test beds, benchmarking, and piloting to really help take the things coming out of the projects, the outcomes, and to scale them, right? A lot of things are developed in projects, very interesting things, but there's no place to really test it and evaluate it, and that's really a bottleneck for many things. And here also, of course, the integration between industrial automation and cloud and IT is very important. So next slide, please. And another thing is that there are emerging technologies that where Europe also has some already initiatives, and it's important to make sure that we can scale them because maybe they are not producing value today, but they may become very big in the future. And for example, neuromorphic hardware, where Europe has a lot of already pilots and are very good. And if we're looking at quantum computing, we should really build this capacity of hybrid quantum classical infrastructure. And there's also opportunities to develop novel accelerators, for example, photonics and optics, where, for example, Europe and Japan are quite good, and also supporting emerging AI paradigms and aligning hardware with that. Next slide, please. So it's really, again, want to stress this importance of co-design, that we really need to connect what we're doing with the use, what do the use cases need, right? And AI, what does it need in terms of hardware? What's the software layers that are needed and so on, to really consider it as one. And make the infrastructure easy to use and keep supporting the federation ecosystems where they are forming. And another thing which is very, I think, a big worry for people working in these kind of projects is that when you apply for a project, the timeline until you can start is maybe 1 year or more, which means that a lot of things you propose in the proposal may already have been done by the time you start. And this is something Europe will need to adapt to, that we really, if we want to stay competitive in AI, we need to have much faster kind of a feedback cycle and a different approach to how we do funding, fund these projects. And the test beds are central to this and create the demand for European tech. And the next slide, please. So as a closing kind of, that we should see this as we are developing a lot of useful capabilities that are useful for different things. And we need to balance the near-term ambitions of, we want to catch up in technologies where we are behind, with also looking to the long term, where is Europe strong? Where is there less competition today? And where can we leverage things that others have developed to develop something on top of that? And these things may become important in the future and may cost less as well. So it's important to balance these. And the next slide, please. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. In fact, we do have a question. I will read it out loud, so we have it on the recording as well. So the question says, do you mean by the software layer any effort to create an open equivalent to CUDA drivers for driving hardware? Is there such an effort? You can also open QA to read it if it's easier.
I cannot, or it's a different tab.
Yes.
Aha,
Oh, CUDA drivers. Okay, I think maybe there are a few ecosystems. I think they originate from the US, where people try to create this kind of vendor. What's the name? Now I forgot the name. But there are a few open initiatives to develop this kind of software. Yeah, the layer between the hardware and the software. CUDA is NVIDIA's way to do the tensor right, to program the tensor computations. And there are open initiatives for this, but you also need to adopt that, and you need to port it to, for example, RISC-V and the ecosystems, the hardware ecosystems forming, right? So there's this thing, you need to port it for every hardware platform you develop. So this is the important thing Europe needs to remember. That it's not just developing the hardware and then people can use the open source software that exists, but you really need to glue these layers. And there's no EU initiative, as far as I know, to do this, but EU projects hook into existing initiatives.
Okay, thank you very much. As I mentioned, we will take the rest of the questions tied to other speakers towards the end of the session, so please be patient. Thomas, thank you very much for this overview. I will not take too much time commenting on it because we also have Juncal Alonso Ibarra, who will talk even more about the insights and, of course, the recommendations that originated from this project in the scope of digital policy report. Juncal, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Diana, for the introduction. By the way, can you hear me well? Perfect. Okay, so as Diana already introduced, I will speak now in this part of the session about one of the other pieces of work within the NexusForum project, which has been the digital policy report. So we have seen previously the NexusForum technical roadmap introduced by Thomas, and we know that the gap between the technological advances and the policy framework is always a challenge. And even more, I would say, now in the current geopolitical situation. So this report is our contribution to try to bridge that gap. So the presentation today is structured in two parts. First block will focus on the context and the methodology we have used, which is this multi-pillar framework. And I believe, or we believe, that throughout the process, we also got some insights that are relevant and are worth to mention. So that's why the plan is to go through this framework, explaining the foundation of this analysis of the European computing continuum. Not as a technical challenge, because this has been analyzed in the roadmap, in the technological roadmap, but also as a strategic need to ensure the European digital independence and the competitiveness on a global scale. So, next slide, please, Diana. Thank you. I won't go deep on the strategic destinations. You have seen this slide before. Just a note to be aware that this has been our long-term vision in NexusForum, and this is the umbrella that has covered both dimensions. On the one side, the technical one with the roadmap, and on the other side, the analysis at policy level. Of course, the policy landscape has been incredibly dynamic in these 2 years of life cycle of the project, especially boosted by this geopolitical situation, again, impacted the digital and the technological landscape with respect to the cognitive computing continuum. So since the start of the project, we have seen a continuous wave of updates and new initiatives. Only to mention some, we started with Draghi and Letta reports, if you remember, some years ago, just in the beginning of the project, and this white paper on Europe's infrastructure, and then followed by the AI Continent Action Plan, the Cloud Sovereignty Framework, and just the last week, this culminated with the sovereignty package, which was presented, and especially the CADA by Anna in her presentation. So these are only some to mention, but within this evolving context is where we have performed our analysis and we have derived our final recommendation. So next slide, please, Diana. Yeah. So this is the methodology. So to arrive to the policy recommendations, we implemented a 3-step framework because we didn't want these recommendations to be just theoretical. We wanted them to be indeed like based and grounded in the technical evidences and in the stakeholders' reality. So the first step was to set up the framework. And here we identified 6 critical dimensions, what we call the key factors that influence the Europe's technological sovereignty with respect to the cognitive computing continuum. This led up to the second step, which was the SWOT analysis and the gap identification. So we moved from the theory to the actual diagnosis of the situation. So we conducted different SWOT analysis, one per factor. And of course, we did this in several iterations because we wanted to also benchmark the findings with the community through different activities, feedback activities that we did. And this process allowed us to identify the critical gaps. We identified 14 critical gaps that currently hinder the advance of the European computing continuum. Finally, from these gaps, we ended up with the policy recommendations. We mapped them to the gaps, and we developed them also with implementation ideas. So in short, we went from the factors to the gap identifications and finally to the identification of the policy recommendations and related implementation actions. So next step, Diana. Thank you. These are the 6 factors, the 6 dimensions we consider relevant in NexusForum to analyze the current situation. First, we have the technology, innovation, and research. And here we aren't just looking at we can do what we can do, but also at the gap between our research ambitions, so what we want to do, and our actual technological capabilities in Europe. Second is the framework conditions, the regulatory and policy frameworks. So here, I would say that these are the rules of the game. And here, as I have already mentioned, we have a very dynamic environment with a lot of acts, implementations, and regulations, even relevant announcements from the beginning of the project to the very end. Third, we have the enable conditions, because European technical capability or capacity, it's nothing without a right ecosystem. And this factor focus mainly on open source communities, open standards to prevent the vendor lock-in, the critical need for skills also, and the ethical frameworks to support this human-centric digital sovereignty transition that Europe is developing right now. Fourth, we have the infrastructures and connectivity. This is the physical backbone, which are the different infrastructures we have for the continuum. Here we have the edge, the cloud, even the space infrastructure, network infrastructure, or if we look to the future, quantum computing-based infrastructure. Fifth, we also address the collaboration and engagement, because we believe that sovereignty is not isolation. So here we analyze different EU and international initiatives, and especially those strategic high-level partnerships with the allies like Japan, South Korea, Canada, and others within the framework program 10 and the Horizon Europe. And finally, of course, the industry participation, because for any policy, for any technology to work, it must be adoptable. So we place a special emphasis here on SMEs, on European SMEs, ensuring that they are not left behind. So by analyzing these factors, we were able to capture the full complexity of the European ecosystem. And we move forward to the SWOT analysis. Next slide, please. Yeah, so from these 6 factors, we moved to the SWOT analysis. So the approach here was to perform a comparative diagnosis. We took the current state of play in the European computing continuum and measured it against an ideal state. And this gap is where our policy opportunities or recommendations lies. So for each factor, we did an internal analysis where we identified the strengths and the weaknesses, and the external analysis analyzing the opportunities and the threats that we need to mitigate. To populate all these metrics or all this data for the different SWOTs, we did several iterations. We relied on multiple sources. We integrated data from our experts in the project, but also held targeted workshops with the community, with industry partners, with different stakeholders. So from this, we were able to do the identification, or to transform this into the 14 critical gaps that were identified, which are, from our point of view, the pain points of the European ecosystem. And this became directly the foundation for the policy recommendations that we released at the end. So next slide presents these 14 gaps. So these 14 gaps are the ones that were like discovered or defined after all the SWOT analysis and the public consultations. One of the strongest messages emerging from this analysis, I would say that the Europe's challenges, it's not just technological, because many of those critical barriers are structural and they relate to dependency, to fragmentation, and to market conditions. I will just go through 6 of them because we also did prioritization exercises with the stakeholders. And the ones that you have seen there with market with some stars are the ones that rise as the most urgent or the most the most critical one. So first we have the technological sovereignty challenges which receive the highest prioritization, because stakeholders see Europe's dependence on non-EU technologies and the limited trust on AI and data infrastructure as a major strategic vulnerability. Second, we have vendor lock-in and SME dependence on non-European hyperscalers, which reflect the high concentration of digital infrastructure in the hands of some providers, which usually are not European. Third, the regulatory complexity for SMEs, with fragmented rules and compliance burden. Fourth, the funding gaps and SME vulnerability. And finally, low confidence in European cloud providers, because we have European cloud providers, but still it remains a significant challenges with respect to confidence and trust, despite, as I have said, this technical progress made in Europe. So from these gaps, I will move forward to the second part of the presentation. So next slide. Yeah. So second part of the presentation. Until now, I have explained the context and the framework we used to derive the policy-related recommendations. To address the 14 critical gaps we have discussed, we propose 7 pillars for action. Next slide, please. Yeah, here are the 7 pillars for actions, which are designed as coordinated set of policy-related recommendations and actions. So as you can see on this slide, we have a structural approach to cover the critical gaps and the failure points that we identified in the previous phase. So here we have first the structural foundations with policy recommendation 1 and 2. One aims for unifying the fragmented infrastructure. The second one focused on the trust and data fluidity across the borders, the European borders. Then we move to what we call the strategic autonomy, and here it comes recommendation number 3, focused on reducing vendor lock-in, and of course very related to the sovereignty package recently published last week and already presented by Anna. And recommendation number 4, which addresses the need of consolidated governance. Then we go with recommendation 5 and 6. These two are like the ecosystem enables. While recommendation number 5 focuses on open source and standards commons, recommendation number 6 provides the necessary support for the industry and especially for the SMEs to scale. And finally, recommendation number 7 ties everything together by enhancing Europeans' technological sovereignty. So next slide, please. Yeah. As said, I will explain a little bit more in-depth the recommendations quickly because we don't have much time. Of course, I will invite you also to review the reports, the complete reports that are available in our webpage, in NexusForum webpage, where all these reports and extended analysis are being published. So for this slide, you can see that we have linked each recommendation with the addressed gaps, so that we cover the gaps that we have identified throughout the analysis. And for each of the recommendations, we also provide key strategic actions. So next slide, please. Yeah, here, as said, we in the second part of the in recommendations 3 and 4, we focus on control and autonomy. Reducing vendor lock-in and strengthening strategic autonomy. Of course, this is the hot topic nowadays, I would say. And here we believe that it's time to mandate open standards and interoperability, for example, for all European funded solutions. We also advocate for prioritizing open source and open core software, for example, in public procurement. So this is the kind of key strategic actions that we are proposing for each of the recommendations. Next slide, please. Okay, so I won't go again throughout all the slides, all the recommendations, sorry, because I already summarized it in the previous slide, but you have all the content there. So just go to the final one because this is the one that covers, I would say, everything. Yeah, so this is like the summary that I want you to have in mind because we started this 30 months ago, and as said, the landscape, the policy, let's say, environment has been tremendous dynamic throughout all these months. So we have tried to catch up on this, and you have all the work we have done and all the policies we have taken into account for this analysis in the webpage and in the deliverables and the outcomes, the reports that we have delivered in the webpage. Another idea that I want you to have in mind is that this is all these recommendations have been has been co-created with the community. So we have had a lot of activities, online activities, on-site activities for the people for the stakeholders, different stakeholders, more industrial, more research-based, academic ones, also policy-related stakeholders, to provide their inputs and to provide their hints on this analysis. And the last is that apart from these policy-related recommendations, we have provided specific actions which are described in the way of concrete levers that can be considered for policy action. So that would be it from my side. I know that maybe we don't have time, but I will be happy to answer questions at the end, or please reach out us through the channels of the project.
Thank you very much, Juncal. I would say that we do have time for one quick question. There is one in the Q&A, so I will read it out loud. It says, any known works on the ethical and political aspects of the cloud edge and AI infrastructure buildup? The political motivation for development is clear in sovereignty, but are there works considering the effects of development for domestic and international citizens? If easy, you can also read it directly for yourself.
Yeah, I'm reading it. On the ethical, I don't see Sachiko is here because, of course, I'm now, or today I'm presenting the overall work, but this has been done by a team of experts. And indeed, the part of the ethical and more related open source and ethical considerations have been done by another expert here, which I would suggest to pass the question to, and we'll try to answer, okay? Because I don't think Sachiko is here today. Is he, Tayana?
Not that I see her, but
Okay.
yes, definitely an interesting question.
Yeah.
We'll have also one more webinar in the following 2 weeks, so perhaps we'll also be able to encompass some of the questions that you write to us today and we don't get to answer live. As Juncal mentioned, you can also check out the papers and the roadmap also on the Cloud-Edge website. You can find the link in the chat. Juncal, thank you very much for this comprehensive overview. A lot of work to pack in just a 20 minutes presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next up, we have a roundtable. It will be moderated by Thomas and joined by 3 speakers. So today we will have Florence Bout, Operations Officer from Open Nebula, Stella Riyad, VP of Industrial Systems from RISE, and Nuno Varandas, Director at F6S Network Ireland, and also the co-founder of F6S. So first of all, from my side, welcome to the final event, and I'm leaving the floor to Thomas.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, and welcome to this round-table panel discussion. Maybe we could ask let's see, I cannot see their videos. Okay, now I can see them. So maybe you could say just a few sentences about yourself, just to introduce yourself to everyone. Yeah, Florence, if you could start.
Hi, thank you for having me. So yes, I'm Florence. I work at Open Nebula Systems as the operations officer, so turning strategy into implementation and supporting on the policy side.
And Stella?
Yes, Stella Real. So I'm, well, here it says VP Industrial Systems, but I'm currently working at the Computer Science Department at RISE, or leading the Computer Science Department at RISE, where we do a lot of research on AI and edge and related topics. Yeah.
And Nuno?
Yeah, good morning to everyone. So representing F6S, the global network of tech startups and SMEs. So here more the voice of the startups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the introductions and very welcome to this roundtable discussion. So we have a few questions prepared that we will discuss with these, and I hope it will be very interesting discussions for the audience as well. So if you could take the next slide, yes. So now we have heard a bit the presentations about some key takeaways from the roadmap and the policy report from the project. So if you could pick out one thing from this that you would like to kind of emphasize in the next 3 to 5 years, what would you, maybe we can do the order of you. So Florence, maybe you can start.
Okay, sure. So taking a step back, the NexusForum roadmap looks at use cases. So starting with use cases, you mentioned quite a few, but two explicitly was talking about autonomous driving. That's quite localized, with urban situations to start with, but the idea is that would grow. So we're potentially talking about a cross-border situation where we can have autonomous driving, Amsterdam to Brussels, Paris to Brussels. So I'm expanding, but I'm talking about the vision because we're talking about 3 to 5 years. We're talking about sustainability as well, and with workload management for sustainability. And what really captured my imagination at an Edge workshop last week was the idea of, making use of Spain's solar panels for workloads during the day, and then using, for example, wind in Sweden overnight or something like that, or making use of your very long summers and solar that way. But you also have manufacturing and smart factories. Automotive industry is huge part of that, and we of course have them having plants in different countries in Europe. So that's leveraging AI. So that's everywhere that we want to go. It's kind of the beautiful vision for 3 to 5 years. And then if we look at what we have now, we have projects like Ipsisis, looking at the full continuum and how to support that. We're going into supporting our cloud providers, building data centers and looking at how we can facilitate that. And we're looking at our SMEs and appliances. But what I'm very much appreciating from the NexusForum roadmap is that middle layer that connects the two, because going with my sustainability example that I'm really appreciating right now. If you are looking at sustainable workloads and you're looking at Spain and Sweden, you need to have the interoperability. You need to have the portability to do that. And it seems a bit futuristic right now, but how we connect that is that middle layer, the orchestration management. And of course, OpenAI does orchestration management, but I really do think that is the critical thing that's identified in the NexusForum roadmap. And so much of the NexusForum roadmap, it's identified explicitly, but is built around that, talking about ecosystems, and harmonizing markets and regulations to support interoperability and portability. So I definitely think that that's something that we need to build on, especially in the context of sovereignty going forward. You can have sovereign data centers, sovereign kind of CSPs, you can have sovereign appliances, but with that middle layer, there's a kink in the chain if that's not sovereign. So definitely building up that middle layer.
I think that's an interesting perspective also, since you are a company working in this space. And I think in the next question, we will come back to this as well. So very interesting. Maybe Stella, sorry, can you go back to the... So Stella, what do you have? Do you have something you think is very key here from the discussion?
So I think it's kind of interesting looking at this roadmap because it forms, a whole. It's difficult. It's actually difficult to extract one part and say this is the most important one, because one part will not work without the others. And I think this roadmap is really a nice roadmap for taking us to European sovereignty. What I did reflect on, and that might be worth, that I would pick here, is that I think the roadmap is sort of pragmatic in its shape and form. It doesn't say that we have to become the best in all of these areas, but rather finding a way where we could actually reach some kind of sovereignty, focusing on building capabilities, building infrastructure, but then also be smart in what we develop ourselves and what we actually can use from others. So I'm going to go for the pragmatic approach. I think it's maybe not a recommendation, but I think I like that. I think that's very useful for getting us forward here.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and I think you will talk a little bit more about that later in the discussion as well. So I think that's a very interesting thing to pick up on as well. And Nuno, do you have something you would like to emphasize?
I probably have a different perspective. So I understand the research side, and then I'm going to the other side, from the startup side, or from the demand or So what I see, and the report also mentions, is that Europe and the US, we match US in terms of funding in the percentage of GDP, of course, of public funding in innovation. What we lack afterwards, it's what happens afterwards. So we bring innovation, we manage to fund and bring grants to a lot of innovation, but afterwards there is no demand. There's no market for those, and all our innovations are then crossing the ocean, going to the other side, and get funding and get the market. So, in my perspective, true that all these infrastructures that we are building and connecting in Europe are essential for our future, but we also need to supply or to invest in the supply side. So, in the demand side. So, in the place that Europe needs to be able to pick up on those innovations and take it to the market and be able to grow and scale up the companies. Using all the innovations, all the infrastructures that we are building with these brands, we also need to help them to grow inside Europe and not then go outside Europe. So I think that's something that we need to go in the next 3 to 5 years, is really not only fund innovation, but also fund the other side, so the demand side, in order that we have a unified market that really sorry for the word, but sucks the innovation that we are building.
Okay, yeah, that's also very interesting and connecting a bit to what Florence ended with. And I think it's a good transition into the next question. So if you could change the slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So Nuno, do you have some thoughts about how could Europe then support this? You mentioned this helping build demand, right, in Europe. So do you have something you would like to add to this?
Yeah, well, we have seen some changes already in European funds. So we move from the cost-driven to lump sums. So this is one change. So it means that it's more delivery-driven. But I think a next step that the Commission or the European funds could go to would be to fund also the product. So fund the first revenue, not fund the deliverable, that today we get to the final of a funding program and you get a report, you get a certain TRL, amazing, and you have fund. But in fact, we are missing the next point. So the first revenue point. So if the Commission would be able on that funds to force as a deliverable at the end of the project to have something tangible, a product that has a market, that would be one way. The other way is also to force to have market players inside the proposals, so that there is also an understanding of the demand side. And well, that's something that the Commission is doing on helping startups to navigate in a all market, in the single market. That's now the 28 Act, but it would be also necessary to not have such a fragmented market. Today, a company that is successful in one market still needs to navigate on 27 other or 26 other markets to be successful in Europe. While if they jump to the US, it's much easier. They are open to a full market, which is much bigger than we have here. So these would be my 3 main suggestions here.
Yeah, that's thank you, Nuno. I think Florence, as a company, then maybe you also can complement with your perspective. So how do you think Europe can support this transition?
Yeah, and I support everything Nuno just said. I think we're completely aligned and in sync, and I'll build and maybe go ever so slightly deeper. But just to say that I think the NexusForum roadmap beautifully describes where we want to go in theory. And, we have made progress, and it's found its way into policies and groundbreaking initiatives. Of course, don't know if it's directly or indirectly, but we do have IPSISIS that's groundbreaking. We've got IPSI AI coming out. We've got all the Horizon projects. We've also then now have GADA that's just come out. We've got the JIPS course that's coming out. So and I'm really happy Nuno said that about funding, because you always hear about oh, we need more money, we need funds. We don't have the capital and the support that the US has or non-European players have. I was at the Brussels Economic Security Forum, and it was all about funding again. But these IPSISIS, IPSIA, Horizon, the CHIPS call, they all show that there is money, and maybe it's not as much as we think we might need. But then the per capita was comment from Nuno was very interesting. Maybe it's not inclusive or accessible enough, but there is kind of funds. Europe has made money available to go in here, so that's kind of not the issue. And then, so if we then look at the projects themselves, if I take IPSISIS as an example, because people got a lot of funding, so we have telcos that are very much working together. That's great, because they weren't as much years and years ago, so they're really banding together and trying to federate from a telco point of view. So we're building up the infrastructure side, we're supporting our SMEs building appliances. That's great, and we are supporting the middle layer obviously because we're in IPSISIS as well. But what we're seeing 2.5 years after the start of IPSISIS is that everyone, we still have the ongoing research, we have development, but everyone still seems to be working quite a bit in silos. We're not that much closer or that much more tangible exactly to where Nuno is going with a European stack or a solution or an alternative to the hyperscalers. IPSISIS was pre-commercial, you can kind of argue that. And then we do have Euro 3C looking at commercialization. But there's other things that we need to think about when we go to federation. And so, I guess where I'm going with this is that if everyone's working in silos, we're not coming to this federated solution, and that comes to integrations and ecosystem. I've actually just heard the other day that Germany is creating a German stack. We have the Italian ecosystem that's very much thriving, but that's not closer to creating a European solution. So it'd be looking at calls and how we can really foster the ecosystem in calls and the integrations in that. It is part of IPSISIS, but maybe it's not strong enough, or it has to be worded differently. Then look at procurement policies as well, and look at that part of the equation, and how we support it that way, leading by example. I know the Commission is working on improvements to their procurement policies, so going in that direction. And we talk about stacks, but
this what you mentioned now is, I guess, grounding the demand in the kind of public procurement ecosystem, right? So what Nuno also mentioned. So I think this is also very interesting because the IPSA, Sweden is not in IPSA-SIS, right? So we have maybe a slightly different perspective. And maybe I could invite Stella also to talk a little bit about how Europe should position itself globally in these important technologies, right? We see a lot of development in this area. So how do you see, Stella?
Yeah, so I think I want to connect to what the previous speaker said here, that we are maybe not that fundamentally behind in terms of research or innovation or knowledge. I think we are quite innovative in many parts of Europe, but it is really making it operational at scale, which is difficult, and for multiple reasons, many of them already mentioned here. And I think the fragmentation in Europe is definitely a problem for us, trying to scale and also building ecosystems and so on. But at the same time, I think we're at a point where our dependencies on non-European platforms are they're no longer like just a potential threat. They're becoming a real threat. I think we saw that last week when the big non-European company decided to sort of stop access to one of the best models, right? AI models, I should say. So I think this discussion is becoming more and more like, in terms of sovereignty and positioning, it's becoming more acute. And I think there are two different ambitions in this question, which I think might be helpful to separate. And the first is where can Europe genuinely compete like globally. And then we have to be like really selective. We have to play to our strengths. We need to sort of build on strengths that we already have. We have mentioned telco, mentioned automotive, that we have certain industries where we can continue building, and also try to be, smart. We have strengths in HPC, embedded systems, low power electronics, and so on. We can try to build, open energy efficient inference systems that fits our needs, rather than, just building the biggest possible, because that's expensive and difficult going forward. We can focus on trustworthiness, safety critical engineering, and so on. But as also mentioned here, it only works if it's backed by demand creation. So I think we really need to also see where is the demand in Europe. And I think that sort of lesson isn't always learned properly, or we haven't learned that lesson properly. But then I think like the second ambition is more fundamental in some sense. It's just being able to cater to our own needs. And that positioning is more about, having knowledge, know how to build our platforms, know how to form our ecosystem, so we can cater for ourselves. And that is not about winning globally. That is just about having sovereignty, digital sovereignty in this entire stack, I would say. Then again, one has to be pragmatic. Like what can still be provided from elsewhere? Like it can be enough that we get hold of an LLM, for example, that is open source, and we have access to the weights, and we can host it in Europe. We don't have to necessarily build one from scratch. But in terms of infrastructure and those types of capabilities, yes, we need to have a gigafactory in Europe, so we can train the model, or at least fine tune the model and so on. And we need to focus on building knowledge. And that knowledge sort of has to be hosted in universities, in research institutes, but also companies of different type. It's not a one organization show in any way. So we need to work together for that.
Yeah. That's very good. And I think it's also a natural way to, if we go to the next slide, the next question, which again ties back to this, I think what we talked about, the demand and how do we get adoption. So in your opinion, Nuno, what do you think are the main barriers preventing this uptake?
Well,
you
some of
mentioned
which
something.
I already mentioned, the fragmentation of the markets, the fact that there is lack of a demand or a single demand in Europe, and potentially also the bureaucracy. It's true that, again, European Commission is trying to reduce as much as possible the bureaucracy, and this is a positive point. And I think the next cycle of work program will be much different. Nevertheless, there's still a lot of friction there. I can talk about that success, for instance. We apply to EU funds and we participate a lot in EU funds, but we don't do it for research activities in-house or market activities. Everything we think about today that it's a potential market for us or an innovation that we want to do, we start validating, we start building things internally, testing it, and if it goes through, it goes through. And we don't apply to a fund to wait for 8 months. Well, you need to wait for 4 months for a result, and if it is awarded, you need to wait another 4 months to start a fund, to start working on it. So it is a big gap between the idea up to the point that you get the funds to make something happen. So, and between this, there is a lot of bureaucracy. I know that Europe is changing this. Even there are some programs with the cascade funding, and this will come out now. I think the results should come between the end of July, beginning of August, where the cascade funding will give away more than 1 million to one entity. Okay, it's the first time this is happening, so it's a lot of money going through one only entity. and it will be very fast. So people will enter, will apply it 2 months after they get the result, and they start getting the money as well if they are awarded. So this mechanism of cascade funding, I think it was intelligent from the Commission to reduce the time that it happens, the thing. So, but you have to understand that, for instance, this call in specific, which is about AI, we applied in April for something that will only start the project next year. And Europe was thinking about something what should be the challenge of AI, but the challenge will be totally different in 1 year. So this is the other problem, that we thought about something that is a challenge today, but in 1 year, the challenge will not be no longer a challenge, it will be a solution, and we need to have another one. But okay, we are on the way, but this is another way to reduce. It's really to reduce this bureaucracy friction. And I think that's it. And if we put market traction in as a deliverable in the project, I think this could be a very interesting thing to do as well, to force the uptake of the research and innovation results.
Yeah, I think also this timeline problem that you mentioned, that also connects back to what from the roadmap, that when it comes to AI, we need to change the approach, right? For example, for very long-term development, it's okay to have this process, but when it comes to AI, in half a year, everything has changed. Yeah. So, Stella, you also came a little bit into this. Would you like to add something to what do you see as main barriers?
Yeah, for sure. And just sort of first wanted to connect a little bit to what Nuno said, about things becoming, or research topics or questions becoming irrelevant very quickly. It's not maybe answer to this question specifically, but I think that is a challenge that the entire sort of innovation system is facing now. Like the old ways of working is not really working anymore. So we really need to see some innovative solutions to how to distribute funding and actually get work done. But in terms of like the barriers when it comes to uptake of research and innovation results, I think there are naturally some of them that are technical, which is about access to infrastructure, access to validation environments, test environments, which this type of access is not that easy for especially for SMEs and public sector adopters, I would say, and that can often be like a challenge. Then I think the other challenges are largely organizational. It's definitely like especially when we talk about AI adoption, it's not a technology challenge. It's it changes. It requires changes in workflows and processes, roles, skills, decision making, and so on. And I don't think all organizations, far from all organizations, realize that you need to transform in order to adopt these new technologies. And then I think in general, not specific to AI, but to a lot of innovation and research, we end up with pilots, and that's also often, I think, from lacking business cases. You need to have a solid business case, not from the very, very ground research, of course, but at some stage during the research and when it starts to become innovation, you also need to figure out, is there a business case in here? And I think that's a barrier that is difficult to sort of break it down. I think we've tried in multiple ways, but we tend to get stuck in some kind of pilot phase. So new ways of working with, different types of organizations collaborating, but also, early stage research having more better understanding of sort of the end application, I think is something worth looking at as well.
Yeah, so I think then also something I've like reading from the room is maybe that the projects need to be much better anchored in the demand side, right? So, and maybe more adaptable and flexible to changes in what the demand might be, and an evolving understanding also of what the demand is, and also what the organizational changes are needed as well. to adopt it. So we are running out of time now. Florence, maybe you could connect to like summarize what do you think should be prioritized in these EU calls and maybe keep it to 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay. Um, okay. I think actually Stella and Nuno both said it, so I'm very much building on what they said, and that's the commercialization. I was going to end with that because, let me just talk very quickly about the other things and then circle back to that. But I think we are talking about stacks and we're seeing that more and more in calls. So like the chips call is talking about contributing to the AI open stack. So we're talking much more on stacks where we are creating a competitive, a commercial competitive solution or going towards that. We've got the EU open source strategy. I heard recently openness is security, so we're very much going towards that. We've got the transparency into the stack, the sovereignty element, made in Europe, the CADA tiering. We're looking at the purchasing policy. I think that has quite a bit of work to go, because if you look at the AI factories, for example, all the tenders for that is still going to a lot of non-EU players, even though it's fundamental, to Europe and us staying competitive as a European continent. So I think that needs a lot of work. But exactly to what Nuno and Stella were just saying, we have to move beyond the theoretical exercise and look at the commercialization aspects. Individual projects are already doing that, like Euro 3C is exactly looking at the commercial aspects of that. But I think that needs to be in the tenders, in the calls, that needs to find its way in much more strongly. Like, what are we going to get out of this that goes beyond exactly as Stella and Nuno said?
Okay, yeah, that's thank you very much for, I think, very interesting perspectives and discussion from all of you. I think very happy with this roundtable. So thank you very much for coming and participating.
Thank you very much. Also from my side, I think you have provided a lot of valuable input and different perspectives, especially in the challenges in fundings and how our topics prone to changing the whole landscape of what we are focusing on. There were some comments rather than questions in the Q&A part. I would just quickly address them. There was a question whether there is a platform or place to get an overview of the horizon and other projects funded in the topic. There is always the website of Cordis where you can look through the current topics that are to be funded by the not only Horizon but also other frameworks. From F6S side on f6s.com, you can always look for the open calls, events, but also partners. And we had another comment about the roadmap being based on research projects and how there would be the need for adding more concrete KPIs and timelines, numbers in terms of the percent of the EU SMEs that use the EU cloud providers and what is the target. So Thomas, maybe you can kind of compliment me on this response, but I would say that the roadmap is not only focused on the research projects, but also on the input from various industrial players, as we wanted to kind of encompass all sides or include all the relevant stakeholders. But if you would like to quickly comment and add something to this, I would appreciate it.
Yes, so of course it's research and innovation. So it's also about the ecosystem building and how to bring the research to an innovation level as well. Now, of course, the KPI question is a bit, it's an interesting question, but it's also very tricky. And one thing is, I think, well, we didn't do it in the roadmap because that we didn't. Well, who sets the KPIs, right? So that's the question. And we could have tried to do it, but we didn't feel like we were in the right position to do that. We collected the input that we gathered from the ecosystem, and assembled it in the roadmap. And I think the KPI question is an interesting question and maybe something for a later follow-up to address.
Thank you, Thomas. I would say let's take another question. We are a little bit behind on time, but I think that the questions are very interesting, so please bear with us. There is one more question for Thomas. How to define the reference timescale for the implementation of the roadmap? How to adapt the implementation of the roadmap to the technological evolution? How to define success in the implementation across time? And how to balance the near-term ambitions and the global tendencies? So a lot of questions packed in one.
Yes, yeah, very nice. It's a very tricky question. I mean, for the timescale, for example, it depends on the technology area. It depends on how much you invest, how much effort and momentum there is from the ecosystem. I mean, when we're talking about AI, for example, I think also the timeline, basically the roadmap needs to update frequently, at least for the kind of short-term things. And then when it comes to the long term, so we try to think about this. What's the time scale? And the problem is that it's so hard to say because it also depends on the decisions you make. Where do you put the money, right? So it's a very tricky question. Again, I think it's for good as a follow-up when you prioritize what you should do, but this is also something that needs to be done on an EU level or together with the Commission. Where do they want to put the money, right? First, you need to prioritize where you want to put the money. So, and yeah.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay, so we will move forward with the next presentation, and since we have some other questions, we will tackle them after that one. So next slide, please. We will have a roundup on some other results from the project, mainly on sustainability and exploitation as a, let's say, mandatory and very important part of the impact that one project creates. And this will be presented by Mr. Antonio Alvarez from Open Nebula. Antonio, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you, Diana. Hello, everyone. I am going to present the results. It's kind of a summary from an exploitability perspective of each of them. If you could move to the next slide. Yeah, these are the main results that the project has produced. First, I would like to highlight the fact that they are public in the sense that there are public URLs. You can access them. You can consult them, and each of them provide value not only to us as a consortium, but also to the community, to the European community. They are the digital policy report, the research and innovation roadmap, then the public catalog of European researchers, and then I will talk a bit about the events that we have organized that have produced valuable output as well. Next slide, please. So the digital policy report, this is what Juncal has presented. Just as a reminder, it's a comprehensive analysis of the EU legislation that impacts the continuum. It includes the AI Act, Data Act, Cybersecurity Act, and some others. It also includes a relevant comparison between Europe, Japan, and South Korea on how to manage digital technologies and to find new ways to work together. And from the open source perspective, it explores how to use open source software to help Europe to become more independent and innovative. And why it is important for us, because it's kind of a translator of complex law into clear and actionable advice, and it helps companies and researchers to avoid compliance mistakes. Also, for the definition of the funding, it provides policy-aware foundation in the sense that it will help to allocate the funding correctly in line with the EU digital agenda. And of course, it's a way to enable global collaboration because it offers a shared understanding of the digital policy ecosystems and facilitates stronger and cross-border partnerships. Next slide, please. also, of course, we have the roadmap that has been presented. There was a question about the timeline. In our deliverable, we say that this timeline is between 7 and 12 years. That's why we say it's a long-term guide. It's a gap bridger because it connects the academy and the industry. It's a way for achieve an understanding between each other. And it's also important in the sense that it identifies vital steps that are required to reach goals like, for example, the digital sovereignty or better cybersecurity or more sustainable technologies. So it means that it focuses on key challenges. And why it matters and it's important, not only for us as a consortium, but also for you who are here in the event, because it gives clear direction. So it helps organizations to anticipate future trends, making long-term research, and plan business in a more accurate and effective way. Again, it helps funding projects in a more smarter way because provides a very valuable feedback, and it's also an enabler for stronger global partnerships. Next slide, please. So these two that I have presented were known to you because Juncal and Thomas presented them respectively. I am going to add also this public catalog of European researchers, which is this is a wiki that we have created, and it includes an online list of European researchers and the institution and the department they belong to. It highlights those experts that are working on the technology that are power model computing, like, for example, Cloud-Edge and artificial intelligence. And it's really interesting because it's a kind of a central place where you can quickly find top research teams and see what they are knowledgeable about, what is their specialty. And of course, it is going to ease collaboration because if you want to build a consortium, it's a place where you can search for the right people and start new partnerships, and then go to the calls and compete to get your new project funded. And then next one, please. Okay, so these are not documents, but it's very important too because it's the NexusForum series of events. It's something that we have been doing along the project, not only in Europe, but also in Asia. So it has been a combination of annual summits in Brussels and also international workshops in Asia, in particular in Japan and South Korea, and adding also regular online webinars. So it's been a dedicated space where different researchers, different projects have been in contact, and they have been exchanging experience, exchanging knowledge, and have been attended by industry experts and also government officials. And it has been an enabler also for the effort coordination. Okay. Again, it has been a way to connect academic research, industry perspective, the vision of the policymakers, etc. Also has been a way for people to find each other and establish new collaborations, new partnerships. Has been a way also to boost innovation visibility. Has been a way for different projects, different initiatives to show what they are doing and to create awareness. And from the political and also diplomatic perspective, let's say, it has been very helpful to strengthen the ties between, on one side, the European Union, and on the other side, our partners in South Korea and Japan. If you move to the next one, I can give you some details for these are pictures that belong to the events in Europe, in particular in Brussels. So we have had 3 summits. The first one was in 2023, and that one was focused on synergies. So we brought together disconnected research and industry groups. And after some exchanges, we make sure that they shared a common direction, a common pathway. Then in 2024, we addressed the challenge of the sovereignty. So there were open conversations about the journey of digital sovereignty and the importance of relying less on technology that is non-European and basically start building an European secure computing backbone. And then in 2025, we became more practical because we focus on practical links between AI, cloud infrastructure, edge, sustainability aspects. So these 3 years have followed, let's say, a progressive pathway, and the outputs have been generally satisfactory. They are also developed in the public deliverables that the project has produced. And if we go to the next one, which is about the events in Asia, of course, not only in Europe, but we have held events both in Japan and South Korea. So the event we held in Japan focused on smart connectivity. So we brought together European and Japanese experts to align the perspectives on cloud, edge, IoT. It was an opportunity to use the research roadmap that was presented by Thomas to get feedback from one of the world's most advanced tech market, which is the Japanese one. So it was a very interesting and useful event for us, this one in Japan. And with respect to the event in South Korea, it was the Digital Convergence Week. And there we looked at the next frontier, which is AI, 6G, and decentralized data spaces. And we found a good synergy between European leadership in foundational research and policy governance with Korea's speed in industrializing and adopting new tech. And basically, that's it from the perspective of exploitation.
Thank you very much, Antonio. So yes, even though the project is finishing, it's not the chapter closed. It's been just further setting up of the stage for what's to come. We are coming to the close of our event, so I would like to give back word to our coordinator, Maria Angeliki, for the closing keynote. Maria Angeliki, please go ahead.
Thank you, Diana. I hope my everything works. So I followed all the talk discussions. It has been very interesting, and I want to take just 2 minutes to highlight a few key takeaways from my side. So the landscape has been evolving very rapidly, but in fact, the core challenge remains the same. We are still facing the question how Europe can reduce reliance on a few dominant players without simply creating another dependency. I think we talked about that sovereignty does not mean isolation. Pooled digital sovereignty, that means working with like-minded partners. That's smarter and more efficient. New Zealand, Canada, India, Japan, and South Korea, there are some of the good examples. There is strong potential for collaboration, in particular with Japan and South Korea, in semiconductors, data spaces, and practical AI in order to build more resilient ecosystems together. We also heard that Europe is entering a new phase with the Cloud and AI Development Act, and the focus is now shifting from strategy to scale and implementation. I think what we heard today and the panel discussion also confirmed that much of the groundwork is already in place. We have the strategies, we have the roadmaps, we have even the funding. What is now needed is to invest in user-friendly infrastructure, something that people actually want, to harmonize markets and regulations to enable portability and interoperability, and to stimulate demand so that innovation we make in Europe can actually scale and doesn't leave the continent. Finally, one message, I think that's a cliche, but it's always the case. Collaboration is key. In order to deliver on Europe's ambitions, we need a continued alignment between the industry, the research, and the public sector. And that's where NexusForum has played a role over the past 2.5 years, bringing all these stakeholders together and aligning these perspectives. And I think the consortium hopes that this is not the end. We just heard about the sustainability plan that will ensure that this work continues beyond the project end, so that these insights translate into long-term impact. So to conclude this webinar, and very soon the whole NexusForum project, sincere thanks to all the speakers, partners, organizers, to you, Tajana, and the team at F-Success, and all the participants for your contributions, and lots of good and insightful comments also in the chat. We hope that today's outcome support your work, and it helps shape a more sovereign and resilient digital ecosystem in Europe. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Maria Angeliki. I would also like to personally thank to the entire consortium, project partners, and participants today. The recording will be available very soon on our social media and on our website and YouTube. In case of the roadmap, as you already know, you can check it out on the Cloud-Edge-IoT website. And for any other questions, feel free to write. Thank you very much for joining today. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.